Sarasota, Florida. A quiet coastal city where families felt secure and daily life moved at a calm, steady pace. But on November 7, 1997, that sense of safety was shattered. Inside one family's home, a shocking act of violence took place that would leave the entire community in disbelief. The victim was 35-year-old Sheila Bellish, a devoted mother whose life was taken in a brutal attack. That afternoon, Sheila's 13-year-old daughter Stevie came home full of excitement. A boy she liked had just asked her to the school dance, and she was already dreaming of the dress, the shoes, and the big night ahead. But as she walked up to the house, something felt wrong. The front door was wide open, a rare sight in their household. Inside, the silence was unsettling. Stevie called for her mother but got no answer. She stepped carefully into the kitchen and froze at the sight before her. Her mother was lying on the floor, lifeless. The room showed clear signs of violence. Blood stained the tiles, with splatters on the counters and walls. In shock, Stevie reached for the phone, only to find it also smeared with blood. Terrified, she ran to another room to find a clean phone and tried to call for help, her hands shaking as reality sank in. When she returned to the kitchen, her worst fear was confirmed. Her mother was gone. Police arrived to find a heartbreaking scene. Sheila's body lay face down, showing the devastating injuries of a close-range gunshot. But perhaps the most haunting detail wasn't the crime itself, it was who had been inside the house during the attack. Sheila was the mother of 6 children, including 4 toddlers who were barely 2 years old. The quadruplets had been wandering the hallway when Stevie came home. Only one of them, Timmy, could speak in simple words. When their father asked what had happened, the little boy managed to say that a man had come into the house and hurt his mother. Detectives were left to piece together what had happened. There were no signs of robbery. Nothing had been taken. There was also no evidence of sexual assault. Whoever entered that home hadn't come for money or possessions. The sole purpose had been to kill Sheila. What at first looked like a mystery soon began to unravel into a story of betrayal, greed, and cold-blooded cruelty. Sheila had always dreamed of building a life filled with love, stability, and success. That dream seemed to be within reach when she met Alan. He was everything she thought she wanted: charming, well-spoken, and outwardly respectful. To Sheila, it felt like fate had finally brought her the partner she had been waiting for. Their relationship moved quickly. After only 3 dates, Alan proposed, and swept up in the moment, Sheila said yes. In 1982, they were married and started a family in Salem, Oregon. Soon, they welcomed 2 daughters, Stevie and Daryl. On the surface, they appeared to have an ideal life. But behind Alan's polished exterior lay a much darker reality. Alan Blackthorne, born on June 5, 1955, in Eugene, Oregon, had grown up in a deeply troubled home. Raised by a single mother, he endured a childhood filled with cruelty and abuse. At times, the punishments were so severe they left lasting scars. In one incident, his mother beat him so badly with a stick that he suffered broken bones. In another, she doused him in gasoline and tried to set him on fire. Experiences like these shape him into an adult driven by anger, dishonesty, and an obsessive need for control. At first, Sheila didn't see these darker sides. She believed she had found a hard-working, ambitious man. But after the wedding, Alan's ambitions revealed themselves to be rooted not in determination, but in greed. He dreamed of starting a chain of electronic stores and presented a polished business plan to Sheila's father, Don Walsh. Convinced by Alan's confidence, Don invested heavily, even transferring properties into his son-in-law's name. Instead of building the business, Alan burned through the money. He indulged in expensive meals, designer suits, and a lifestyle he couldn't actually afford. Within a year, the venture collapsed, taking the Walsh family's fortune down with it. Sheila was devastated. She had trusted him completely, and he had led her family into financial ruin. Still, she stayed. Loyal and resilient, she gave him another chance. Looking for a fresh start, Alan moved the family to San Antonio, Texas. Along with the move came a new identity. He legally changed his last name to Blackthorne. Under this new name, he started selling muscle stimulation devices, marketing them to doctors and wealthy clients at steep profits. This time, the business took off. Alan's natural charm and persuasive nature won over even the most doubtful customers. In no time, he had rebuilt his wealth, once again surrounding himself with luxury cars, fine clothes, and the lavish lifestyle he craved. But money couldn't hide the growing cracks in his marriage. Sheila began to see more of Alan's true nature. His controlling behavior extended into every part of their lives, and his unusual demands in their private relationship became an increasing source of conflict. The confident young woman who had once been swept away by Alan's charm now found herself desperate for a way out. Divorce was no longer a distant possibility. It had become her only escape. Alan wasn't interested in love or partnership. What he craved was power, humiliation, and control. With other women, he indulged in disturbing encounters, and the most unbearable part was that he forced Sheila to watch. At first, she went along, hoping to hold her marriage together for the sake of her children. But over time, the emotional toll was crushing. The lively, independent woman she had once been faded into someone anxious, fearful, and deeply unhappy. Eventually, she moved out of the marital bedroom, refusing to give in to his demands any longer. That act of defiance enraged Alan, and his cruelty escalated. Insults turned into violence. In one terrifying incident, he shoved her head into a toilet and tried to drown her. On another occasion, he beat her so severely she feared for her life. Sheila reported him to the police, unaware that she was far from his first victim. His two previous wives had endured the same cycle of abuse. By 1987, after 5 painful years of marriage, Sheila divorced him. But the split didn't end the nightmare. Instead, it marked the beginning of a bitter, decade-long custody battle over their daughters, Daryl and Stevie. Both sides hurled accusations, and even after they each remarried, the hostility never truly ended. For Sheila, though, life eventually brought new happiness. In 1993, she married Sheila Bellish, a salesman who gave her the love and support she had always longed for. The couple moved to Sarasota, Florida, hoping for a fresh start far away from Alan. Then, in a twist of fate, Sheila gave birth to quadruplets in 1995. Overnight, the family of 8 became a local sensation. For a time, it seemed like Sheila had finally left the chaos of her past behind. But Alan wasn't ready to let go. Losing custody of his daughters fueled his rage, and watching Sheila thrive in a new life only deepened his obsession. Determined to strike back, he hired a private investigator to track her down in Florida. Once he had her address, his thoughts turned to revenge. Alan confided in a golf partner named Daniel Rocha, a small-time criminal who admired Alan's wealth and influence. To Rocha, Alan seemed like the kind of man he wanted to become. So when Alan came to him with a request, Rocha agreed. Alan told him that Sheila was abusing their daughters and needed to be taught a lesson. At first, he suggested a beating. But before long, his instructions changed. He wanted her gone, for good. Through Rocha, Alan connected with a man willing to do the job, Jose Luis del Toro. The deal was set at $14,000. On November 7, 1997, Del Toro borrowed his grandmother's car and set off for Sarasota. Along the way, he made 2 stops, first at a sporting goods store to buy camouflage clothing, then at a gas station after getting lost and asking for directions. Eventually, he reached the Bellish home. Armed with a gun, he forced his way inside and waited. As Sheila went about caring for her toddlers, he watched her quietly. For a moment, doubt filled his mind. She wasn't the cruel abuser Alan had described. She looked like a loving mother surrounded by her children. He considered walking away. But fate didn't give him the chance. Sheila noticed him and screamed. In a reflex, Del Toro pulled the trigger. The .45 caliber bullet struck her in the face and she fell to the kitchen floor. To make sure she was dead, he grabbed a knife from the counter and stabbed her before running from the house. Behind him, 6 children, 4 of them babies, crawled on the blood-stained floor and cried for the mother who would not answer. Investigators moved quickly once key clues came to light. The attacker had not been as careful as he thought. Biological traces left at the scene gave detectives material to test, and a vigilant neighbor who had written down a suspicious car's license plate provided a small but crucial lead. The suspect fled across the border to Mexico, but the trail did not stop there. He was found, captured, and returned to the United States to face charges. In July 1999, Jose Luis del Toro admitted his role. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and armed burglary, and was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. As investigators followed the paper trail and interviewed witnesses, more names surfaced. Del Toro's cousin, Sammy Gonzalez, cooperated with authorities, explaining how the plot had been put together. Gonzalez eventually pleaded guilty to solicitation of capital murder in 2003 and received a 15-year sentence. The inquiry didn't end with the gunman and the recruiter. Testimony, documents, and witness accounts pointed back to the man who had started the whole scheme, Allen. Although he denied involvement, courtroom evidence painted him as a man consumed by anger over losing custody of his daughters and enraged at his ex-wife's new life. Statements introduced at trial showed that he had asked acquaintances for help, offered money, and pushed for retaliation that escalated from threats to murder. Allen was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and domestic violence. Like the man who pulled the trigger, he was given 2 consecutive life sentences without parole and was sent to a federal prison in Beaumont, Texas. Daniel Rocha, the friend who had connected Allen with people willing to carry out the plan, was also convicted for his role in arranging the plot and received a life sentence without parole. Courts concluded that this was not the random act of a stranger but a calculated conspiracy born of bitterness and revenge. Trial testimony revealed chilling details: offers of payment, promises of bonuses, and conversations about making Sheila unable to care for her children so custody might be regained. Witnesses spoke about the sums discussed and the logistics of carrying out the crime, while the children's loss remained at the center of every proceeding. In the end, the convictions answered the questions the detectives had chased from the moment the license plate was noted and the samples were collected. Sheila's murder was the product of planning, recruitment, payment, and betrayal, a cold, brutal decision made by people who turned their grudges into deadly action. The legal verdicts brought accountability, but they could not undo the damage done to a family or fill the silence in a house that, for a time, had once been full of life. Even among those involved in the plot, there were moments of hesitation. Later accounts revealed flashes of doubt, times when it was clear that Sheila was not the cruel figure Allen had painted her to be, but simply a devoted mother. Sadly, those doubts came too late. The murder was carried out, leaving 6 young children without the woman who had been the center of their world. The motive behind Allen's actions was simple but poisonous: rage, humiliation, and the need for control. He could not accept that Sheila had divorced him, won custody of their daughters, and then gone on to rebuild a happy life with Sheila Bellish and their quadruplets. To Allen, her independence and joy were an unforgivable betrayal, and revenge became his answer. For orchestrating the murder-for-hire scheme, Allen was sentenced to 2 life terms with no chance of parole. But prison did not quiet the chaos of his life. In 2001, he was attacked by a gang behind bars and barely survived, forcing authorities to transfer him to another facility. Years later, on November 18, 2014, Allen died in federal custody at the age of 59. The exact cause of his death was never made public. The heaviest burden, of course, was carried by Sheila's children. When she was killed in 1997, her daughters Stevie and Daryl were only 13 and 11, while the quadruplets were just toddlers, barely 2 years old. Their stepfather, Jamie, took on the enormous responsibility of raising 6 grieving children. With the support of his extended family, he worked to give them stability and guide them through the years of loss that followed. As time passed, the children grew and began building their own lives. Stevie, now in her late 30s, has been recognized for her resilience, carving out a life for herself and giving back to her community. Her journey has become a testament to strength in the face of tragedy. Daryl and the quadruplets have chosen quieter lives, focusing on healing away from public attention. Though Sheila's life was cut short in an act of senseless violence, she is remembered by those who knew her as a woman of warmth, kindness, and determination. She was a devoted mother who endured hardship but never wavered in her love for her children. Her legacy lives on in them, in their survival, their growth, and their determination to move forward despite the unimaginable loss they endured.